we're going to talk about something that's so shocking as to be unbelievable to some. Jews who collaborated with the Nazis during the 1930s and the start of World War II. I'm not talking about some nutcases, but the leaders of groups that eventually founded the State of Israel. Now, before you shake your head and turn the channel, listen to a headline from this week's Jerusalem Post. It's from September 23, 2009. It reads, "When Zionists made a deal with the Nazis." It was written by historian Edwin Black himself, a Zionist, who has written a whole book about how Zionist organizations in the 30s broke the boycott against Germany and sold Nazi goods in Palestine. Coincidentally enough, Lenni Brenner, a historian who specializes in this period, has just released a paperback edition of his book, 51 Documents, Zionist Collaboration with the Nazis. I interviewed him about it in New York City in August. You've written 3 books that detail collaboration by major Zionist organizations with Mussolini's fascists and Hitler's Nazis. Is that right?
Yes. At that time, in other words, the Mussolini-Hitler period, the Zionist movement was divided into, from about 1931 on, into 2 rival organizations. One was called the World Zionist Organization, and the other one was called the Zionist Revisionist Movement. Okay, now they merged sometime in the 50s again, and the Bibi Netanyahu, his party, or the Likud party, are the direct descendants, as it were, of the Zionist revisionist movement of the 20s and 30s. Okay, now what Zionist revisionism stands for is this. If you look back at history, when the League of Nations gave, which was a pro-British organization, it was, I mean, set up by the British and the French, when they gave Palestine to the British as a mandate, what they meant by Palestine was what we moderns call Palestine, in other words, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River, and what we now call the Kingdom of Jordan, okay? But in 1922, the British took Jordan away from the so-called Jewish national homeland and gave it to the Hashemites, who had gotten kicked out of Mecca by Ibn Saud, all right? The World Zionist Organization leadership decided, look, there are no Jews in Jordan, so and not that many in what we call Palestine, so basically they're taking away what we don't have, so, you know, what we can't use. So, okay, we're not going to make a big fuss about it. But Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was the founder of Zionist revisionism and one of the leaders at that time of the World Zionist Organization, he said, no, 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 no. You can't just let the British take away Jordan from the so-called Jewish national home, because what that'll do is it'll convince the Arabs that, hey, we got them to give up, we got the British to give up Jordan to us. If we keep on fighting, we'll get them to give up the rest of Palestine. You gotta say no, okay? You gotta demand that the British revise their policy. So that's how they got the name Zionist revisionist, okay? In other words, he understood in 1922 a central fact about Zionism, which is that it's, and he wrote an article about it called "The Iron Wall: We and the Arabs," in which he said, "Look, let's tell it, I'm paraphrasing him, you know, but let's tell it like it is. We're a colonial movement, okay? Well, if you look at the history of colonialism anywhere in the world, the natives always fight the colonials, okay? And they keep fighting until it's impossible for them to win. Like the Indians in the United States, you know, fought for, you know, 2 centuries and finally reconciled themselves when it was impossible for them to win. So we have to have an iron wall. What he meant was an iron wall of bayonets, okay, in order to build Zionism in Palestine. And we can't give up an inch.
You know, I want to go back a step and get into a very basic thing, because we never really clarified what is Zionism, because some people say, well, Zionism, that's just Jews or what they believe in, and I think we have to cover the distinction.
Well, you know, Zionism is sort of hard to define, because it has the Zionist movement has its idea, you know, and then the rest of us have our idea. Basically speaking, it was an invention. Theodor Herzl, a Hungarian-Austrian journalist, decided that, look, you have all this 1897, let's say, you have all this anti-Semitism in Europe. It's going to go on until the Jews are smart enough to get out and go back to their homeland in what we call Palestine, but, you know, what he would have called Judea, okay, or, you know, Israel is a later name for that, okay. Obviously, the Jews come from Judea, if you know what I mean. Okay. Let's say in 1897, the average Jew in Russia, Tsarist Russia, or Austro-Hungarian Empire, Germany, wherever, most of them wanted to get their rights in their country, okay? If they didn't want to wait around until they got their rights from the Tsar or whatnot, they packed up and emigrated to the United States, where they were more or less equal. You know, there was no legal discrimination against Jews, etc.
But the Zionists had a third idea.
And the Zionists had the third idea. Now, I mean, that's not unusual. You know, if you have millions of people, you have a lot of different ideas, okay? The problem, of course, was that Judea or Palestine, whatever you want to call it, of course, was run by the Ottoman Turkish Empire. And they weren't about to hand over Palestine to the Zionists or anybody else. But when World War I broke out, the British decided, look, we need Jewish support worldwide, and particularly in America, against the Germans who were allied to the Turks, okay? The problem that the British had in getting that support was that they were allied to Tsarist Russia, which was the most anti-Semitic country in the world. So the average Jew was not interested in, you know, wishing Britain and Tsarist Russia to win any war, you know.